Maverick Donovan's breath formed white clouds as he cursed the blizzard that had trapped him at Willowbrook Station for the third day running. The wealthy cattle baron had never been one to wait for anything, let alone weather. But even his prize stallions couldn't navigate the treacherous drifts that had swallowed the mountain passes whole. He was checking his pocket watch for the 100th time when a soft moan drifted from the abandoned corner of the station platform. Maverick's weathered boots crunched through snow as he investigated, his heart nearly stopping at what he found. A woman lay huddled against the station wall, her lips blue with cold. Her traveling dress torn and inadequate against the brutal Wyoming winter. Her leather medical bag, frozen to her side, told him everything. She was the nurse who'd been expected at his ranch 3 days ago. The one he'd assumed had turned tail and fled back east like so many others. "Dear God," he whispered, scooping her unconscious form into his arms. Her body was alarmingly light, weakened by days without food or proper shelter. Maverick had built his empire by making quick decisions, and he made one now that would change both their lives forever. He carried her to the station's back room, where a small potbelly stove offered meager warmth. As he worked to revive her with hot coffee and his own wool coat, he studied her face-angular cheekbones, determined jaw, and when her eyes finally fluttered open, the most startling shade of violet he'd ever seen. "You're safe now," he murmured, watching recognition dawn in those remarkable eyes. "Mr. Donovan." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the crisp accent of someone educated back east. "I'm Cordelia Nightingale. I came about the nursing position." Maverick felt something shift inside his chest, something that had nothing to do with the cold. This woman had endured 3 days of hell rather than abandon her commitment. She had grit, the kind that built legends in the untamed West. "Why didn't you seek shelter in town?" he asked, helping her sit up slowly. Cordelia's violet eyes flashed with pride even in her weakened state. "I gave my word to be here when you arrived. Nightingale doesn't break promises, Mr. Donovan." The storm raged outside, but Maverick found himself studying the delicate curve of her neck, the way her auburn hair caught the firelight. He'd hired her sight unseen based on her credentials from Boston General, expecting a stern, matronly woman. Instead, he'd found a fierce angel who'd nearly died keeping her word. "The roads won't clear for days," he said, removing his gloves to check her pulse at her wrist. Her skin was soft as silk beneath his calloused fingers. "We're trapped here together." Something electric passed between them at the contact. Cordelia's breath caught, and Maverick felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. He'd sworn off women after his disastrous engagement to a gold-digging socialite, but this woman was different. She'd chosen duty over comfort, integrity over safety. As night fell and the wind howled like banshees around the station, Maverick Donovan realized he was in more danger than he'd ever been in his life, not from the storm outside, but from the extraordinary woman warming herself by his fire. The second morning brought no relief from the storm, but Cordelia had recovered enough strength to reveal the fierce spirit that had carried her through medical school and across a continent. Maverick watched, fascinated, as she transformed the dingy station into a makeshift medical clinic, organizing supplies with military precision. "Your foreman's telegram mentioned cattle troubles," she said, checking his hands for frostbite with professional thoroughness. "Pneumonia in the herds." Among other things, Maverick replied, trying to ignore how her gentle touch sent fire racing through his veins. "Half my men are down with winter fever. The other ranchers think I'm crazy hiring a woman, especially one from Boston." Cordelia's eyes sparkled with challenge. "Let me guess they think I'll faint at the sight of blood and run home crying to Mama." Something like that. Maverick found himself grinning for the first time in months. "They don't know about your 3 days on this platform, do they?" "They don't know a lot of things about me, Mr. Donovan." She began rewrapping his bandaged knuckles with surprising skill. "I performed surgery in Army field hospitals during the Indian conflicts. I've delivered babies in blizzards and reset bones by candlelight." Your cattle and cowboys won't shock me." The way she said it, with quiet confidence and steel in her voice, made Maverick's pulse quicken. He'd built his reputation on reading people, and everything about Cordelia Nightingale spoke of hidden depths and unshakable resolve. "Why come west?" he asked as she prepared a meager lunch from their dwindling supplies. "Boston General is prestigious. You could have married well, lived comfortably." Cordelia's hand stilled on the tin of hardtack. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across her features. "I was engaged once. Dr. Reginald Ashworth, chief of surgery. He wanted a wife who would host dinner parties and bear sons, not practice medicine. When I refused to give up nursing, he made sure no hospital in Boston would hire me." Rage flared in Maverick's chest. "So you came here?" "I came here because the West doesn't care about my past or my gender, only what I can do." She met his eyes steadily. "I earned my way, Mr. Donovan, just like you did." They were more alike than he'd imagined, two souls who'd fought for everything they'd achieved, who understood that respect was earned, not given. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation flowed from medicine to ranching, from philosophy to dreams neither had dared voice aloud. When evening came, they sat close to the stove, sharing warmth and stories. Maverick told her about building his empire from nothing, about the loneliness of success. Cordelia spoke of her passion for healing, her dreams of establishing a proper medical practice in the territory. "The other ranchers' wives won't accept me," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "A woman who works, who never married, who came west alone, not be an outcast." "Not all of us care about such things," Maverick said, his voice rougher than intended. When she looked up, their faces were inches apart, her violet eyes reflecting the firelight like jewels. The moment stretched between them, electric and dangerous. Maverick had kissed many women, but none had ever looked at him the way Cordelia did, as if she could see straight through to his soul. "We shouldn't," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. "No," he agreed, his hand rising to cup her cheek. "We shouldn't." But as the storm raged and their hearts thundered louder than the wind, they both knew that some forces were more powerful than propriety, more dangerous than any blizzard. The kiss, when it finally came, was everything Maverick had imagined, and more. Cordelia's lips were soft, but her response was fierce, matching his passion with her own untamed spirit. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. The small room charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "This is madness," Cordelia whispered. But her fingers were tangled in his dark hair, holding him close rather than pushing away. "Then we're both mad," Maverick replied, tracing the delicate line of her jaw. "Because I've never wanted anything more in my life." They spent the night talking by the dying fire, sharing dreams and fears they'd never voiced to another soul. Cordelia told him about growing up as the daughter of a country doctor, watching her father fight prejudice and poverty to bring healing to those who needed it most. Maverick spoke of his childhood as an orphan, clawing his way up from nothing to build an empire that would never leave him vulnerable again. "Is that why you never married?" Cordelia asked, curled against his side as dawn approached. "To protect what you'd built?" "Partly," Maverick admitted, his fingers stroking through her auburn hair. "But mostly because I never found a woman who could match me step for step, who wouldn't expect me to make myself smaller to make her feel bigger." Cordelia lifted her head to study his face in the firelight. And now, instead of answering with words, Maverick kissed her again, pouring 3 days of growing desire and a lifetime of loneliness into the contact. When they separated, his decision was made. "Marry me," he said simply. Cordelia's eyes widened in shock. "Maverick, we barely know each other." "I know enough," he interrupted, cupping her face in his hands. "I know you have the courage to travel across a continent alone. I know you'd rather freeze than break your word. I know you see patients, not profits, and that you're not afraid of hard work or small minds. What else do I need to know?" "That I won't give up my calling," she said firmly. "If I marry you, I'll still be a nurse. I'll still tend to anyone who needs help, regardless of their ability to pay." Maverick's smile was brilliant. "Then you'll marry me." "Yes," Cordelia breathed, wonder in her voice. "God help me. Yes." The storm broke that afternoon, and they rode to his ranch together. Cordelia bundled in his coat and cradled against his chest on his stallion. The Rolling D Ranch sprawled across the valley like a kingdom, with a grand house that took Cordelia's breath away. But their arrival caused an immediate sensation. Maverick's foreman, Joaquin Restrepo, took one look at Cordelia and grinned knowingly. The ranch hands were more cautious, uncertain how to treat a woman who was clearly more than just their boss's new employee. "She's going to be my wife," Maverick announced to the assembled crowd, his arm around Cordelia's waist. "And she's the finest nurse this side of the Mississippi. Anyone who has a problem with either of those facts can draw their pay and ride out." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring until Old Cookie, the ranch cook, stepped forward and tipped his hat. "Welcome to the Rolling D, ma'am. We're right glad to have someone who knows doctoring around these parts." One by one, the others followed suit, though Cordelia could see the questions in their eyes. She'd have to prove herself all over again, but she'd done it before. And this time, she wouldn't be doing it alone. That night, as Maverick showed her through the house that would soon be her home, Cordelia marveled at the turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been alone and desperate. Now she was betrothed to one of the most powerful men in the territory, with a chance to build the medical practice she'd always dreamed of. "No regrets?" Maverick asked, pulling her into his arms in front of the great stone fireplace. "Only one," Cordelia replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. "That it took a blizzard to bring us together." Their engagement lasted exactly 2 weeks before the first real test of their partnership arrived in the form of a diphtheria outbreak in the neighboring settlement of Cedar Gulch. Word came at dawn through a half-frozen messenger who'd ridden through the night, and Cordelia was already packing her medical supplies before Maverick could voice his concerns. "It's too dangerous," he said, watching her fill syringes and roll bandages with practiced efficiency. "Diphtheria kills more doctors than patients. Send supplies, send money, but don't go yourself." Cordelia's violet eyes flashed with the fire he'd come to know and love. "Would you send your foreman to handle your prize bulls while you stayed safe at home?" "This is what I do, Maverick. This is who I am." The argument that followed was their first real fight, fierce and passionate as everything between them. Maverick's fear for her safety warred with his admiration for her courage, while Cordelia refused to compromise the calling that defined her very soul. "I won't be a rancher's pretty wife who plays at nursing when it's convenient," she said finally, strapping her medical bag closed. "You fell in love with a woman who keeps her word, who doesn't run from hard choices. Don't ask me to become someone else now." In the end, they rode to Cedar Gulch together, Cordelia to tend the sick, Maverick to organize relief efforts and ensure his safety. What they found was a town in the grip of terror, with 17 people dead and twice that number fighting for their lives. Cordelia threw herself into the crisis with the dedication of a warrior. For 5 days and nights, she barely slept, moving from house to house, fighting death with every skill at her disposal. Maverick watched her work with growing awe and love, seeing her transform from the elegant woman who graced his dinner table to an avenging angel who refused to let another soul slip away. It was on the 3rd day that disaster struck. While treating the sheriff's youngest daughter, Cordelia began showing symptoms herself: the fever, the difficulty swallowing, the telltale gray membrane beginning to form in her throat. "You have to leave," she whispered to Maverick, her voice already becoming hoarse. "You can't risk exposure. The ranch needs you." "The hell I will," Maverick replied, scooping her into his arms despite her protests. "The ranch can burn to the ground before I leave you." He established a makeshift quarantine in the town's abandoned schoolhouse. nursing Cordelia through the worst of the illness with the same fierce determination she'd shown her patients. For 3 terrifying days, her life hung in the balance while Maverick held vigil, praying to a God he'd stopped believing in years ago. When her fever finally broke, Cordelia found herself looking up into Maverick's haggard face, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and worry. "How many?" she whispered, her throat still raw. "None," Maverick replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Not a single soul lost after you arrived. 23 people you saved, Cordelia. 23 families who'll remember you in their prayers forever." Tears flowed down her cheeks as she realized the magnitude of what they'd accomplished together. But more than that, she'd seen the depth of Maverick's love, a man who'd risked everything to stay by her side, who'd fought death itself to keep her in his world. "The other ranchers' wives," she said weakly, "they'll never accept me now. A woman who catches diseases, who brings danger. Let them try to turn you away," Maverick said fiercely, taking her hand in both of his. "Every person in this valley owes you their lives. You're not just a nurse anymore, Cordelia. You're a legend." As they prepared to return home, the entire town of Cedar Gulch turned out to see them off. Children threw wildflowers, women wept openly, and strong men removed their hats in respect. The woman who'd arrived as Maverick Donovan's was leaving as something far more precious, the angel of Cedar Gulch, the nurse who'd stared down death and won. But their trials were far from over. News of their heroics had spread throughout the territory, and not everyone was pleased with Cordelia's growing influence. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. And this time, they wouldn't be made of snow and wind. The attack came not with bullets or fists, but with something far more insidious: whispers that spread through the territory like poison. Dr. Cornelius Hartwell, the established physician in the county seat of Millbrook, had been quietly building a campaign against Cordelia since word of her success at Cedar Gulch began spreading. "It's unnatural," he proclaimed to anyone who would listen. "A woman practicing medicine without proper supervision, without the guidance of a qualified male physician. Mark my words, her reckless methods will bring tragedy to this territory." The whispers found fertile ground among the more conservative ranchers' wives, who saw Cordelia's independence as a threat to their carefully ordered world. Mrs. Gertrude Pemberton, wife of the second-largest landowner in the valley, became the unofficial leader of the opposition. "That Nightingale woman thinks she's better than the rest of us," she declared at the weekly ladies' church auxiliary meeting, traipsing about unchaperoned, tending to men's ailments, putting on airs about her education. "It's an insult to decent, God-fearing women everywhere." The campaign reached its crescendo when Dr. Hartwell filed a formal complaint with the Territorial Medical Board, challenging Cordelia's right to practice medicine without his supervision. The hearing was set for Millbrook, and suddenly their wedding planned for the following month seemed in jeopardy. "They can't stop me from nursing," Cordelia said, pacing the length of Maverick's study like a caged lioness. "I have credentials, testimonials, proof of my training." "Credentials don't matter if the board won't recognize them," Maverick replied grimly. "Hartwell has connections back east. He's been working this angle for weeks." The real blow came when 3 of Maverick's neighboring ranchers' men he'd considered friends informed him they were reconsidering their business partnerships. The implication was clear: marry the controversial nurse and face economic isolation. "Let them come," Maverick said, when Cordelia suggested postponing the wedding. "I built this empire once from nothing. If I have to do it again to protect you, so be it." But Cordelia had faced prejudice before, and she knew that running would only validate their critics. Instead, she made a decision that shocked everyone. She requested to address the Territorial Medical Board directly, to defend her right to practice in an open forum. "Are you certain about this?" Maverick asked as they prepared for the journey to Millbrook. "Hartwell will have allies on that board. It won't be a fair fight." "When has anything ever been fair for women in medicine?" Cordelia replied, checking her bag one final time. But I have something he doesn't, the truth. And testimonials from 23 families who are alive because of my care. The hearing was scheduled for the courthouse in Millbrook, and word spread quickly throughout the territory. It would be more than a medical hearing. It would be a trial that determined whether women had a place in the healing arts of the American West. On the morning of their departure, Cordelia was surprised to find a delegation waiting at the rolling D. Joaquin Restrepo led the group. Along with Cookie, several ranch hands, and most surprisingly, Maria Santos, the Mexican woman whose difficult childbirth Cordelia had attended just weeks earlier. "We're riding with you, Senora," Joaquin announced, his weathered face set with determination. "You saved Maria's life and her baby's. That makes you family." And more riders joined them along the way, farmers whose children Cordelia had treated. Townspeople from Cedar Gulch who had ridden 3 days to support her. And even some of the more progressive ranchers' wives who had grown tired of Mrs. Pemberton's sanctimonious lectures. By the time they reached Millbrook, Cordelia had an army behind her. The courthouse couldn't hold everyone who wanted to attend, so the hearing was moved to the town square, where a platform was erected for the proceedings. Dr. Hartwell appeared confident as he took his place, flanked by the Territorial Medical Board and several stern-faced physicians from back east. But as Cordelia rose to address the crowd, her violet eyes blazing with conviction, Maverick felt a surge of pride that nearly brought him to his knees. "Gentlemen of the board," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the square, "I stand before you not as a woman seeking permission to practice medicine, but as a healer who has already proven herself in the crucible of life and death. The question is not whether I am qualified. The 23 souls breathing in Cedar Gulch have already answered that. The question is whether this territory will embrace progress or cling to prejudice." The battle for Cordelia's future and their love was about to begin in earnest. What followed was the most extraordinary medical hearing in territorial history. Dr. Hartwell presented his case with practiced eloquence, citing regulations, precedents, and concerns about the delicate nature of feminine sensibilities. When faced with the harsh realities of frontier medicine, "Gentlemen," he declared, adjusting his spectacles for dramatic effect, "we must ask ourselves if we truly want our wives and daughters exposed to the unseemly aspects of medical practice. Miss Nightingale's wanderings unchaperoned through mining camps and cattle ranches, her intimate contact with all manner of men, her exposure to diseases and conditions that no respectable woman should witness. Surely these are not the actions of a proper lady." A murmur ran through the conservative faction of the crowd. But Cordelia remained calm, taking notes and preparing her defense. When her turn came to speak, she rose with the dignity of a queen addressing her court. "Dr. Hartwell speaks of propriety and delicate sensibilities," she began, her voice carrying easily across the packed square. "Let me tell you about propriety. Is it proper that Mrs. Elena Vasquez nearly died in childbirth because Dr. Hartwell was too drunk to attend her delivery? Is it proper that 3 children in Cedar Gulch perished from pneumonia last winter because there was no medical care available for 50 miles? She gestured to the crowd, where faces she recognized nodded in agreement. "Dr. Hartwell questions my credentials. I graduated first in my class from Boston General Hospital's nursing program. I served in field hospitals during the Apache conflicts, where I performed emergency surgery by lamplight and saved lives that male physicians had written off as lost causes." Maria Santos stepped forward from the crowd, her infant daughter in her arms. "This woman," she called out in accented but clear English, "she saved my life when I was bleeding to death. My little Rosa breathes because Senora Cordelia's hands are blessed by God." One by one, testimonials poured forth. The sheriff from Cedar Gulch testified about the diphtheria outbreak. A grizzled miner told how Cordelia had set his shattered legs so skillfully that he could still walk without a limp. Children who had been near death from various ailments stood healthy and strong, living proof of her abilities. But it was old Dr. Benjamin Morrison, a retired physician who had served the territory for 30 years, whose testimony proved decisive. He hobbled forward on his walking stick, his white beard flowing in the autumn breeze. "I've been practicing medicine since before most of you were born," he declared, his voice still strong despite his age. "I've seen charlatans and miracle workers, fools and geniuses. Miss Nightingale possesses something rarer than book learning or proper credentials. She has the healing touch that can't be taught. Only born into a soul destined for service." He turned to face the medical board directly. "If you deny this woman the right to practice her calling, you're not protecting the territory, you're condemning it to needless suffering and death. I stake my reputation, built over 3 decades of service, on her abilities." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Dr. Hartwell wasn't finished. His face flushed with anger. He played his final card. "All this sentiment is touching," he said coldly, "but it doesn't address the fundamental issue. Miss Nightingale practices medicine without proper supervision, charges fees for her services, and operates completely outside the established medical hierarchy. She is, by definition, an unlicensed physician masquerading as a nurse." It was a clever legal argument, and for a moment Cordelia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. But then Maverick stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Dr. Hartwell raises an interesting point about fees," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Perhaps the board would like to review Miss Nightingale's financial records." Cordelia's eyes widened as Maverick produced a thick ledger from his coat. "This documents every medical service Miss Nightingale has provided since arriving in our territory. The payments column is quite interesting." He opened the book and began reading. "Alina Vasquez, difficult childbirth payment. 1 jar of honey and a hand-woven blanket. Timothy Morrison, broken ribs from cattle accident payment. 2 chickens and a promise to mend fences. The Johansson family, treatment for scarlet fever payment. A carved wooden doll and their gratitude." The crowd grew quiet as the truth became clear. Page after page revealed the same pattern. Cordelia had never once demanded cash payment, accepting whatever families could offer or nothing at all. "The only fee Miss Nightingale has ever charged," Maverick concluded, "is that her patients get well and live full lives. If that makes her a criminal, then this territory has lost its way." The medical board retired to deliberate, but the real verdict had already been delivered by the crowd. When the official decision came an hour later, a unanimous vote to grant Cordelia full recognition as a territorial medical practitioner. The celebration could be heard for miles. As the sun set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Cordelia found herself surrounded by well-wishers and new patients already seeking appointments. But through it all, her eyes kept finding Maverick, the man who had stood beside her when the whole world seemed arrayed against them. "Ready to go home, Dr. Nightingale?" he asked, using her new title with obvious pride. "More than ready," she replied, taking his offered arm. "We have a wedding to plan." The wedding of Maverick Donovan and Dr. Cordelia Nightingale became the social event of the decade in the Wyoming Territory. What began as a simple ceremony in the rolling D's garden transformed into a celebration that drew attendees from across the region, including territorial officials, fellow ranchers, and dozens of Cordelia's grateful patients. Mrs. Gertrude Pemberton, swallowing her pride after witnessing Cordelia's triumph at Millbrook, personally supervised the floral arrangements. "If we're going to have a lady doctor in the valley," she declared with characteristic authority, "she deserves a proper wedding befitting her station." The ceremony itself was held beneath a canopy of autumn aspens, their golden leaves creating a natural cathedral that took everyone's breath away. Cordelia wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to accommodate the territorial fashion, with a veil of Brussels lace that had belonged to Maverick's adoptive mother, a gesture that moved both bride and groom to tears. Dr. Benjamin Morrison officiated, having been ordained as a minister in his youth, and his words captured the essence of their extraordinary love story. "Dearly beloved," he began, his weathered hands steady despite his age. "We gather today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate a partnership that has already changed the face of this territory. Maverick and Cordelia, you have shown us that true love is not merely passion or convenience, but the courage to stand together when the world stands against you." As they exchanged vows they had written themselves, there wasn't a dry eye in the assembled crowd. Maverick's promise to support Cordelia's medical calling in sickness and in health, in triumph and in trial, brought nods of approval from the medical professionals present. Cordelia's vow to build an empire of healing alongside your empire of cattle, creating a legacy that will outlast us both, spoke to their shared vision for the future. The reception that followed was a true frontier celebration, with musicians playing everything from classical waltzes to cowboy ballads, while guests danced on a wooden floor laid specially for the occasion. The feast included delicacies imported from Denver alongside local specialties prepared by Cookie and the ranch hands. But it was during the toasts that the true significance of their union became clear. Joaquin Restrepo raised his glass and declared, "To the patron and patrona who showed us that strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together." Maria Santos added her own tribute, "To the woman who saved my life and taught us all that healing hands know no gender." Even more moving was the surprise appearance of a delegation from Cedar Gulch, led by the sheriff whose daughter Cordelia had saved during the diphtheria outbreak. They presented the couple with a hand-carved sign reading Donovan Nightingale Medical Clinic, announcing that the town had voted unanimously to fund a proper medical facility with Cordelia as its director. "You gave us back our children," the sheriff said simply. "Now, let us give you a place to save more lives." As their wedding night approached, Maverick and Cordelia stole away from the celebration to walk through the gardens of their new home. The Rolling D had been transformed by Cordelia's presence. A wing had been added to serve as her medical clinic, complete with a modern surgical suite and recovery rooms for patients who needed extended care. "Do you ever regret it?" Cordelia asked, leaning against her husband as they watched the stars emerge in the clear mountain sky. "Trading your bachelor freedom for a wife who brings wounded cowboys and pregnant farmers to your doorstep?" Maverick's laugh was rich and warm. "Never. My life was empty before you arrived, Cordelia. I had wealth and power, but no purpose beyond accumulating more of the same. You showed me that true wealth lies in the lives we touch, the healing we bring, the love we share." Their first year of marriage exceeded every expectation. The Donovan Nightingale Medical Clinic became the premier medical facility in the territory, drawing patients from hundreds of miles away. Cordelia's innovative approaches to frontier medicine, including the first successful cesarean section performed west of the Mississippi, earned recognition from medical journals back east. Maverick's cattle empire continued to thrive, but he discovered a new passion for supporting his wife's medical mission. He established a fund to provide free treatment for indigent patients and began investing in medical supply companies to ensure the clinic never lacked for equipment or medicines. Their partnership extended beyond their professional lives. When Cordelia became pregnant with their first child, she continued practicing medicine until the very week of delivery, assisted by Maverick, who had learned enough basic medical skills to serve as her partner in emergency situations. Their daughter, Victoria Esperanza Donovan, was born during a spring blizzard, while her parents were returning from a medical emergency at a remote mining camp. Maverick delivered his own daughter with Cordelia, coaching him through the process, and their love story gained yet another legendary chapter. As the years passed, the Donovan family became synonymous with healing and hope throughout the territory. Their children, Victoria, followed by twins Harrison and Helena, grew up understanding that their parents' love had created something larger than themselves, a legacy of service that would endure long after they were gone. The old-timers still tell the story around campfires and in saloons. How a wealthy cattle baron found a freezing nurse at a remote station and discovered a love that changed the course of territorial history. How their partnership brought healing to the frontier and proved that true love could overcome any obstacle, whether natural or man-made. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to their extraordinary romance came from an unexpected source: Dr. Cornelius Hartwell, the physician who had once opposed Cordelia so vehemently. Arrived at the clinic one snowy evening, hat in hand and humbled by age and experience. "I was wrong about you, Dr. Donovan," he admitted, using Cordelia's married name with genuine respect. "You've accomplished more good in 5 years than I managed in 20. I've come to ask if an old fool might be allowed to learn from your methods." Cordelia's response captured the essence of the love and compassion that had made her legendary. "Dr. Hartwell, there's always room for another pair of healing hands. Welcome to the team." And so their love story became history, not just the tale of two hearts finding each other in a blizzard, but the foundation of a medical dynasty that brought healing, hope, and progress to the American frontier. The Rolling D Ranch still stands today, its original buildings preserved as a monument to the extraordinary partnership of Maverick Donovan and Dr. Cordelia Nightingale, whose love truly did make history.